We have arrived to lesson 3 of never paying for a website again. Never paying for a website again? Yes, never paying for a website again. In lesson 1, we went over the what, how, and why. In lesson 2, we learned how to set up our VS Code project with Firebase to never pay a dime again. Did you just say code, Corbin? Don't worry. If you have no experience of coding, it doesn't even matter. There's a new way to code you were only able to do it like a year ago, and I'm showing you how to do it. On top of that, if you're unfamiliar with this series, I provide you with entire Google Docs of instructions, videos to go along with it, and on top of that, I provide you with a free ChatGPT link that allows you to talk about that lesson with ChatGPT to get answers right away. So don't worry, if you have little to no coding experience, these are the perfect lessons for you, as I show you real and practical ways to use AI to code, and it's super simple. You literally could have no clue what you're doing and still build out a website. This doesn't seem real, Corbin. What are you talking about? Trust me, just follow the series. Now we're on to lesson 3. In lesson 3, we're going to go over security and how to set that up for your VS Code project. And then we're going to build a very simple user interface together, and I'm going to show you how to render that on a website live. And then finally, we're going to go over SEO. Let's get started, y'all. We are going to do this today. This is the guideline. As you already know, this Google Doc is going to be in the description down below. I'm also going to include a ChatGPT chat that is specialized for today's lesson. So if you run into walls, run into issues, have questions, ask it. In addition, if you are skipping to lesson 3, or this is the first video you're watching in this series, I encourage you to go back to lesson 1 and start from the beginning, as some of this may look very foreign to you or may look like what is going on. But in reality, we already did all this. So make sure to watch lesson 1, watch lesson 2, and that can kind of get you to the point of what we're about to do in today's video. Last 2 things to note here. Make sure to leave a like right off the bat, because you're going to get a ton of free value. This is a free doc, free ChatGPT chat. And by the end of this entire series, you're going to be able to have a website hosted on a custom URL for free, which is kind of crazy if you think about it, considering how much Webflow, Shopify, WordPress, and all these different websites are charging you nowadays. Therefore, number 2, get a cup of coffee. Let's get to it. No cream, no sugar. Let's just do number 1, which is setting up security. So what we're going to do to set up security is we're going to go to Craigslist. We're going to set up a job posting. We're going to save, $22 an hour to protect. No, I'm just joking. But in this, we're going to show you what security means in this context. So there's plenty of ways to do security in Firebase itself when it comes to storage. Like you'll set up storage rules. This gets into more advanced development. For our specific use case today, it's purely going to be so we can protect high-risk variables. What do I mean by high-risk variables? In the previous lesson, we had set up together our Firebase config variables. This is going to connect us to Firebase. That's just going to allow us to do our hosting. But these variables are high risk. If anyone ever got access to those, they could do some crazy stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to create a .env. I'm going to show you the use case. I'm going to show you why we create these, because another reason we're going to need this .env is that when we set up our webhooks to handle the conversion event, in my context, the conversion event will be when a user provides their email, which puts them into my mailing list. Now, in order to do a conversion event like that, we're going to need some type of webhook in order to communicate with our newsletter provider. That webhook itself is high risk. Therefore, we're going to put that in the env file as well in a later lesson. If anything I just said to you doesn't make any sense, and you're like, what did this dude just ramble about for the last 30 seconds? Don't worry. Step by step, let's jump into it. This Google Doc will be filled out completely by the end of this video. Right now, it's not finished because I'm doing this all live. Let's do number 1 together. We're going to set up our security with an environment variable. But before we do that, go to your cheat sheet. What's the cheat sheet, Corbin? Were you here for lesson 2? No? And that's why you don't know what the cheat sheet is. Coming over to a cheat sheet, grab your directory, Command-C, paste it, enter. Now we're in a directory. Last video, we connected this to GitHub so we can push our code into the cloud. Let's follow some best practices here, or just things you should do so you don't run into errors. What do we start with? Firebase log out. Firebase log out. But Corbin, I logged in yesterday. Do I have to do this again? Yes, because you will run into errors that shouldn't happen. That's like, I did everything right, but I'm running into an error still. These are the kind of things that you just set up in your workflow when you start coding for a day, or at least start messing around for a day, that you just want to do. Firebase log out, Firebase log in. I know y'all seen Karate Kid. Wash on, wash off. Kind of same deal here. There we go. We're logged back in. We're good to go. We could take this one step further here and make sure it uses the correct project. So let's go do that as well. Now, in order to find what your project name is, you could either go to firebase.com or alternatively just ask it within your terminal. Let's do that. Firebase project, semicolon, list. Enter. And sometimes you get little errors like this. And sometimes it can help you. So it says basically, I forgot to add the S. Let's try again. With this command, Firebase projects list, you can add that to your cheat sheet if you want to. You can find out what the project ID is that you can reference. So now that I know my project ID is Web Cafe Landing, what I can do to ensure that there's no issues with the emulator, no issues when I'm pushing to it in the staging environment or production environment, I guess in this context, we just do Firebase use. web cafe landing. But Corbin, it said it was already using it. Trust me, best practices. This is what's going to help you a lot. Also, another thing I want to note is that when I logged into Firebase, it asked me to like install an update for Firebase. If you're only like 1 or 2 versions off, it's not that big of a deal. It only gets into a big deal for really large updates. So don't worry about that kind of stuff. You don't have to be fully up to date with the dependencies you use. Now, in the previous video, we did a ton of stuff, but we never pushed it to the cloud or GitHub. So let's go do that right now. This is always a good practice that if you really mess up, like you delete a file and you don't know what the heck happened, you can roll back to a previous commit. We're going to do git add that git commit -m quotes, and then let's name it. We're going to say Firebase and get connected. We're naming it so that if we really mess up on our new version here, we can roll back to this and we're good to go. We're good to go again. Git push origin and then the branch name main. Boom. This all should go away. All went away. And then this new README is going to change to the most recent branch we just pushed here, which is Firebase and get connected. You can actually see what's changed within that Firebase push or git push and basically make sure everything looks good there. But now we can roll back to that if we run into issues. It's kind of like you're playing a video game and you started at level 2, you get to level 4 and you're like, wait, I missed like an Easter egg in level 2. So you go all the way back to level 2 to make sure that you get that right. Does that kind of make sense? Okay, let's go. Now that we got all that out of the way, best practices, let's do number 1 here. In our terminal, we're going to do touch.env, enter. When we do touch.env, this is going to create a very specific type of file. What does this file represent, Corbin? This represents any high-risk variable, keys, API keys, anything security you put in here, and then you reference it in the project from this file. So the next step we have to do here is we have to ensure that this specific file doesn't push to GitHub. But to be honest with you, to make this even more clear, let's do an example together of the type of information we'll put in this .env. I'm going to go ahead and cover this just because, these are high risk. But when we set this up in lesson 2, we don't actually want to reference this specific API key, auth domain, project ID, storage bucket, all of this within the actual firebase.js file itself. Therefore, go to the Google Doc, paste this over. We're going to do this. We'll do a hashtag here to name it. This is like commenting out code. This is basically stuff that's not read, but it's purely for your use case of like understanding what this is. I'm just going to capitalize Firebase. Why are we doing this? Because of the fact that when we add future things to this env, this just helps with organization. So for example, another one I could add is webhooks, and then we'll basically utilize this in the future. As you see here, what are we going to put here? Basically, your API key, your auth domain, your project ID, everything that you saw within that firebase.js, I want you to copy it and paste it over here. Now, once we pasted all that information in the .env, this is how we reference it in firebase.js. Let's identify a couple things here. First, React app API key. That naming is exactly how it's named here. So when we reference it here, we're doing process.env.react app API key. This is the variable that we set here. And the reason we set it like this is for security reasons. This .env is local to us. When we build with it, it is encrypted. This is high security. Then we just follow that same logic across this file. Boom, done. One is out of the way. We've successfully set up a .env, which will reference in future workflows to securitize high-risk variables. High-risk variables, not to beat a dead horse here, it's just variables you wouldn't want the general internet to know. This could be a Stripe key. This could be your OpenAI API key to access AI, like very high security variables here. On top of that, when you deal with backend functions, you'll have a .env like this, but also you'll use a cloud form of security, such as keys within Google Cloud. This will make more sense, and that kind of stuff I just described there is going to be more relevant for my AI software tutorials that will come out later this year. But for now, number one is done. Which leads us to number 2. If this .env is high risk, we can't have this in the cloud either unless you do the measures that I described earlier. We don't want this in our GitHub. So we're going to use a file within our VS Code called .gitignore. What this file does is it just ignores these files and doesn't push them to the cloud. So when I make an update from the main branch, let's say I make an update to app.js, those changes go to GitHub or GitHub. But if I had app.js here, those changes would not go to GitHub. Knowing this, the way we approach it is we simply just add .env here as well. I'm gonna come right here and type in .env. That simple. I want you to notice the change here. It's green right now, which means it hasn't been pushed to our GitHub. It's like, yo, I'm supposed to be in the cloud, bro. Put me in the cloud. But when I add it here, .env, that green goes away. Just like some of y'all, when you invested in NFTs in 2021, that green went away. All right, I faced it too, okay? We were all in the same boat during 2021. Don't worry about it. We all made some money, lost some money. We'll leave it in 2021. But there we go. Now, your next question might be, Corbin, why is there .local, .development local, .test local, .production local, and all this? When we set up logic, when building out a website, and especially when building out software, there's like 3 major stages here. I don't want to get too deep into this. This might have to be a whole lesson in itself, but this is a quick overview. Let me just try to describe it to you as best as possible. I don't want to get stuck here, but let me explain this as fast as possible. So we got our main branch. This is the code. And let me shrink down. You know, like in Super Mario, when I hit a mushroom or hit a shell, I go doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. We got our main branch, and this is going to get into more logic about setting up different branches and committing. But for right now, all we need to understand is why is there a .env, why is there a let's call it a staging environment, and why is there a .production environment. We got main, and we got our 3 envs. This is probably going to make a lot of sense. We're going to do env, and then we'll do QA. Staging could be called QA, and prod. .env is your local environment. Your local environment is what you saw in lesson 2 with the Firebase emulator on your laptop. This doesn't connect to the internet. If you break something very severely, it doesn't really matter because you just can close the program. No one has access to it because it's on a localhost 3000. The variables that are associated with this, like they're all connected to this local environment. Coming over to .env.qa/.env.staging. What's the difference between staging and QA? Just a different way to pronounce the same thing. Potato, potato. What this environment is it's exactly like your production environment, but it uses its own variables. This is what developers use when they push out an update to confirm it works in a live website. If it's confirmed that everything works perfectly and no breaks occur, then it's pushed to prod, which kind of makes obvious what prod is then, right? .env.prod is like the live website, but people on Google see as the website. Like this is like anyone in the world goes to this website. That's your prod. That's why like when you push to prod, it's a big deal. You don't want to work in prod. You want to make sure anything you push to prod works perfectly. Therefore, your variables in your .env between the local and staging are going to be basically the exact same to an extent. When it comes to OpenAI keys, when it comes to Firebase hosting, when it comes to all those kind of variables, they will be the same between these two. This is due to the fact that because the local and the staging is all for testing and development. The only differentiation you're going to see between a .env and a .env.qa is going to be like the underlying URLs that are referenced. In a local environment, we're going to be using that local host URL. In the staging and QA environment, we're going to be using like a live website URL to do the functions and to everything necessary for that process. Now, the ENV and QA are going to be completely different than the prod. The prod is going to have its own unique IDs, own unique variables. Everything's going to be unique to prod because it's production. We're live. Let's get going. Someone hit record. If you have any questions on that, ask ChatGPT, that chat that I specialized in that Google Doc / in the description down below. On top of that, leave a comment down below. Let me know if that was confusing. That might have been a lot of information at once. I try to explain as best as possible. I could go a lot deeper than that to explain it even better. But some of y'all that already know what ENVs are, like, Corbin, come on. And then the ones that don't even have an idea what an ENV is like, Corbin, come on. Okay, 1 out of the way, 2 out of the way. Let's hit 3. Purpose of number 3 here is building out the homepage itself. This is going to lead into structuring of how we do our folders here, how everything communicates, stuff like that. Best practices here is, let's begin. We're going to hit right click here. We're going to say new folder. The first new folder we're going to add here is just going to be called assets. What are we going to add in assets? This is just going to be images and GIFs. New folder again, GIFs. Therefore, if we ever need to add images, we'll add them in the images folder. GIFs, we'll add them in the GIFs folder. And then the assets is just like the parent folder to make this all more organized. Now, let's go ahead and create the folder that's going to store our homepage. I'm going to do new folder here, and I'm just going to say views. There we go. With views, this is where we're going to go ahead and store our homepage.js and homepage.css. Now, there is a way I could approach this where we could basically make a bunch of different components. What is a component? Think of a component like if I were to come here, one component could be like this top bar. Another component could be the actual page itself. Don't worry about that right now. For now, we're just going to do homepage.js and homepage.css. As I referenced earlier, check out that Google Doc. The code that I'm going to show you in this video is going to be available there. We're going to say new file. Homepage.js. New file, homepage.css. Now, this specific lesson, I'm going to provide the code, walk you through it a little bit, explain it a little bit, but this isn't going to be the lesson where I show you like the new way of coding. the new way of using ChatGPT to code out an entire page. That's probably going to come next, or maybe the lesson after that. Purpose of this specific lesson is for you to understand how to connect this to this, render it on a website, understand how to read the code, basically. Like, I got to give you a little bit of context of how to read the code before I show you how to code with AI. Therefore, let's begin. I went ahead and pasted this over. You can paste this over from the Google Doc as well. I'm going to walk you through step by step here what everything means. Now, the beauty when coding with AI in this new method is that you don't have to deal with typing all this. This stuff can be outputted fast using layman dictation. Let's go and explain this real quick, though. First, imports. What are imports, Corbin? Imports are things we'll use in this file. This is a React-based app. Therefore, we're going to import React and a use state. I put this logic here just to show you the difference in how a file is structured. Next thing, import homepage.css. If you don't know what CSS is, this is what makes things look pretty. For example, in this file, when they chose to put the JS here in the homepage, like the coloring of the actual text itself was made through CSS. Therefore, when structuring files, you'll have your imports here. What are other examples of imports? We will be importing stuff from Firebase, for example. We may be importing things such as a database, a function. In this specific series, we don't have to worry too much here because we're going to do mostly hosting. Now, coming back over to homepage.js, you're always going to wrap your quote-unquote component within these little brackets here, and you'll name it. This naming is important because we'll also export it. Therefore, when we export it, like taking it somewhere else, we will be able to export it to our app.js. Why are we exporting this to app.js? Because this is what's rendered on our website using index.js. Notice how it's imported here, and notice how it's app. Therefore, let me go ahead and add the CSS. Let's launch the emulator. This will become more clear. Now, to launch it in the emulator, all we need to do is type in npm start. Remember, that is on the cheat sheet here. This is not pushing to the actual hosting URL. This is for local use. Let's go and copy it. Simply press npm start and hit enter. Here we go. Notice how it says localhost up there. Well, this looks different, Corbin. That's because we're using this code over here. Now, just to show you what this code does for now, and the purpose of this video is purely just to teach you good practices when it comes to importing files and understanding a JS and a CSS file. All it does is just change color. Is this going to be the final landing page? No. But I wanted to show you functionality here. Now, real quick things. First thing, notice how if I delete this, command save, goes away there. Perfect. Live editing, live results. If there's an error, it will tell you like this, and you'll see it over here. Cool. Command Z. Boom. Furthermore, we have created a CSS for this as well. We've created a JS for this, and we've imported it. Let me explain why. Also, side note, this will all be available in the Google Docs so you can paste over as well. First major thing I want you to identify is that we've imported the homepage.css. This is where we are referencing these specific classes. When you're naming a class, you don't want to use redundant class names. For example, if I'm creating a different button for a different use case and it looks different, we want to do button. You'd add some type of hyphen here to identify it even further. For me, I just added cafe. Therefore, when we reference this class, we can build it in the CSS that's been imported here. So notice, cafe homepage, command F, is the class right here for cafe homepage. Actually, it isn't. It looks like there was a little mess up here with the 4. Boom. There we go. And notice how it changed it as well. So, cafe homepage, cafe homepage. Next major thing to identify here. Notice how we have H1, which is header 1, and P. We can actually change the underlying way it looks using cafe homepage H1 and cafe homepage P. Think of it like cafe homepage is the parent, and then the little things in it is H1 and P. Now, alternatively, we could actually give a CSS class to each of these as well and edit them that way. What I encourage you to do is kind of set up the page that you see here. I mean, you don't have to do Welcome to Web Cafe AI, but set up the situation you see here, play around a little bit. So, for example, what does margin bottom do? So we know it's H1, which is this. What does margin bottom do? Add 5. Oh, okay, so it moves it up and down. Good to know. What does font size do? 1.2. Okay, so it shrinks it. So play around with it a little bit. But as I said, when coding with AI, you don't have to worry too much about this. For example, if I'm coding with AI and I'm like, this looks cool, but I need more spacing between the header 1 and the P, I don't have to know that margin bottom does this. I can just ask AI to do it for me, and then it will give me the correct code, which we'll get into in later lessons. I'm just trying to show you what it means right now. So now that we understand that, I want you to now understand what return means. Return is what we're going to visually see here. Think of this like HTML code. HTML is the structuring of the website, and CSS is the beautifying of the website, making it look pretty. If you just have a purely HTML site, you will know If you search the internet in like 1999, you're going to see some HTML sites. So return is going to be how it's represented on the front end. CSS is going to be how it looks on the front end. What is this, Corbin? This right here is going to be functions that we use in the front end. Now, I set up like a really dummy one right now just to show you the difference between return and the code before that. And all it does is change the color from red to blue. We'll get into more of what this means and how to do this. I just wanted to show you this example here. Notice how when we're referencing it in the HTML return here, we're referencing toggle color, toggle color, toggle color, toggle color. Say that 4 times fast. We're doing other things such as setting up booleans here, which will make more sense. Booleans are true or false. I don't want you to get too confused here. Don't worry. A lot of this will be done with AI. I just want to give you some structure. So now that we know the JS, we have the CSS, and that represents this, how did we even render this? The way we rendered this is that we used our app.js. This is where we're going to put in all of our pages. We are going to use the import again. This is how we import components. We're going to import the homepage. Why is it called homepage? Because the export default is homepage. And then we're going to say where it's from. Notice how it's /, okay? It's in views. We know that. Oh, and then it's named homepage. Okay, boom. That's kind of the connection there. So it's the / like when you get further and further in. I'll zoom in, y'all. My bad. Finally, in order to actually show it, we're going to simply put in this kind of structuring here. Notice if I delete this, hit save, it goes away. Command Z, save, it comes back. This is going to be the structuring. Now, within a component itself, we can make more components. Don't worry, it's not that confusing. So the idea here would be this. This is good front-end structuring. The way we're going to create this homepage is, in theory, I could go out of my way to basically make the entire homepage, like the footer, the different sections, all within the same file. This is 100% possible. This is 100% doable. But for the purpose of this series, I'm going to show you how to create a homepage as the parent component. And then within the parent component, we're going to create child components. The child components are actually going to be what structure the homepage itself. What's an example of a child component? The footer of our website, the newsletter CTA of our website. So our homepage.js is going to be our parent. If that doesn't make that much sense, ask the ChatGPT chat, but don't worry. In later lessons, we'll learn more about that. We did step 4. Now we're on to step 5, which is going to be our SEO. I'm going to explain a little bit more about this. Future lessons, we're going to do a bunch more when it comes to just coding with AI and start building out this web page. But I think for now, you're getting a better grasp on how all this works when it comes to importing, exporting, and really creating a visual element. Therefore, let's set up our fave icon, our logo, and the way it shows up in search. As you'll notice right now, it shows up in that little tab right there as React app and then gives me the React icon. I don't want that. So in order to change that, we're going to come over here to public. And before we do that, let's go ahead and push our commit here and just call it like homepage made. All right, let's do git add, git commit. This is always a good practice when you make like a decent amount of change. Git commit homepage made. Is this going to be the final homepage? No. I just wanted to show y'all how to do it. Git push origin main. Enter. We're good to go. We have successfully committed to our branch. And if we check our branch right now, if I reload and I come over to source, you will notice that in views, we have homepage.js and all of its relevant code. Pretty nice. In public, let's go ahead and set up our faveicon.ico. Let's set up our logo, which is going to be used in alternative ways of showing the fave icon. And then finally, the way it shows up on the internet, or short term, at least how it shows up in our emulator. Therefore, I'm going to come to my current set right now, zoom in a ton, and just save the image to my desktop. Now go ahead and find an image software that we can go ahead and create our fave icon together. This could be done in Canva as well. We're going to hit new file here. Typically, what I like doing is just starting with like a baseline of 1,000 by 1,000. I'm going to hit create. Now with this, we're going to zoom in. I'm just going to simply add my icon. Best practices for fave icons and in general is typically just whatever the logo is that represents your company and how you want it to show on Google and Bing and Yahoo. So for me, I'm just going to go ahead and hit enter here. Looks pretty good. And sometimes I like to go a little bit more to the right. So I'm going to move this to the right a little bit. And that's good enough for me. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. Now that we've saved it to the cloud / your desktop, let's go ahead and export it. We're going to come up here to File, Export, Save as, quick export as PNG. Now, whatever software you're using, same deal, export as a PNG. I'm going to put this in my desktop and hit save. Now that we have it saved, let's go ahead and do 3 things. First thing is that we're going to have to create 2 versions of this. One that is 192 by 192 and another one that's 512 by 512 in pixels. And then finally, we're going to have to create a ICO version of this, which is going to be 64 by 64. Let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and double click this. And actually, let's make 3 different versions. We're going to Command C, Command V, Command V. For best practices, let's go ahead and name them. I'm going to go ahead and call this one 192. And we'll call this one 512. I'm gonna double click this. Now within preview on macOS, all we need to do is come over to tool, adjust size. If you are currently operating in Windows and you know how to do this on Windows, let people know in the comments. I'm gonna go to pixels and I'm gonna do 192 by 192. Hit OK, command save. Same thing for 512. Tools, adjust size, 512. Hit enter, command save. Now that we got all that, let's do one last one. And we are just going to rename this to fave icon. Fave icon. Now, before we convert it, let's go ahead and adjust the size down to 64 by 64. Yes, this is going to look blurry, but when it's super small, you can't really tell the difference. Command save. Go to Google and just type in PNG to ICO. I'm going to choose the first option here, and then we're going to select file. With the selected file here, we're just going to hit convert and download. Here we go. Let's go ahead and take the files we just created together and push them over here. So I'm going to go ahead and make my VS Code a little bit smaller here. We're going to grab our file, drag it into the public folder. Oh, wrong one. Now I got the right one. So we're going to drag our file, come over here, we're going to hit replace. To make our lives easier so that we don't have to retype in this specifics in the code, we're just going to rename this to all the way down to logo 192. Delete, and then we'll do that for 512 as well. This is just going to make it so that when you drag it over, it will just ask to replace both. And boom. Replace, replace. There we go. We have our fave icon now branded, and we have our logo 192 and 512 that's used elsewhere on the internet branded as well. First thing you'll notice is that if you look all the way up to React app, it's our fave icon. Good start here. Let's go ahead and update our index.html so it stops saying React app. Is this a React app? I guess technically it is, but don't worry about that. Now, this is the default way of structuring your index.html. I'm going to use a new way. This will be in the Google Doc. I just like the structuring better on this. It's a little bit more clear. I don't like it when there's like random indentations, but here we go. What you'll notice is that now the description is Web Cafe AI, AI-driven web applications. I'll change this in the future. This is how it's going to show up when, you know, in Google, when you search something up, like Apple, and then it has a little description under it. That's what that is. And then the title is just the way that the tab incurs. So if you look up here, it says Web Cafe AI, Web Cafe AI. Now for me, I'm just going to real quickly add what shows up on Google anyways, and based off my previous website. So I'm going to copy this, paste it over here. For now, just copy this first line here and paste it right here. Pretty good, pretty good. With all this, we have successfully created a better SEO-oriented site. Now, I'm going to also show you in future tutorials how to create the social link. So, for example, if someone were to copy your link or custom link, send it in a iMessage, WhatsApp, or Slack channel, it actually shows you like a little preview image, and it just looks good. Therefore, let's go ahead and save this, push this to Git, and then push it, deploy it to our hosting URL. We're going to do git add, git commit, -m, fave icon, setup, quotation mark, git push origin, main. Now, what I like to do before I push and deploy to the hosting URL is typically just say Firebase use and then the project name again to reconfirm it. So we're going to do Firebase use Web Cafe landing, and this should give me a confirmation that we are currently going to be using that project. Now using Web Cafe landing, coming back over to a cheat sheet here, and my head is in the way. If you remember to push it to our hosting URL or a live link that's on the internet, we do npm run build, and then we do Firebase deploy. npm run build, build your front end, Firebase deploy, build your back end. All we have initialized right now is hosting, so this is just going to give us the hosting URL. This should be pretty fast. Hit Command V, hit enter. There we go. If I go to the link presented here, hit Command C, and boom. Zoom in there right now, zoom in. As you see, this is our live Firebase URL with our new fave icon, with our new fave title or SEO title. On top of that, this has the homepage.js that we showed today. This is a live URL. This is good to go, which means in the next lessons to come, you're going to finally see how I code with artificial intelligence to make the process of building out a website extremely fast. That successfully completes lesson 3. We've done security, UI, and done some SEO. Make sure to leave a like. It's completely free. I'll leave the playlist at the end here of all the other lessons that are going to be associated with this playlist. But for now, we've done a lot of stuff. Go grab some more coffee, go drink it, get going, and I'll see you in the next video.